I always believed my life was perfect. At least, that's what I told myself every morning as I looked out over the city from my apartment on the 32nd floor. The skyline shimmered with lights, like a million tiny promises, and I used to think they all belonged to me. My name is DJ, and for as long as I can remember, I've worked hard blood, sweat, and sleepless nights to reach this life. The office, the sleek car, the apartment, the weekend trips. Everything screamed success. But life has a funny way of showing you that perfection is often just a fragile mask. Sophia Lane, my fiancée, was my anchor. Sweet, caring, endlessly patient, and the kind of person who could make the darkest day feel lighter. People always admired us as a couple. Power couple, they'd say, with just a hint of envy. And then there was Vanessa, my stepsister. Charming, beautiful, magnetic. A force of nature. I'd always known Vanessa had an edge, a way of getting what she wanted without anyone realizing it. She could smile, laugh, and manipulate a room with ease. But she was family, so I trusted her. Or at least I thought I did. It all started on a Friday evening, the kind where the city hums with life and promises. I returned from the office, my mind still running through numbers and deadlines, to find Vanessa already in the apartment. "Hey, DJ," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes glinting with something I couldn't place. "Sophia's in the kitchen. She wanted to surprise you with dinner." I smiled, shrugging off the slight unease that had crept up. She was just being helpful, right? Vanessa was always eager to be in control, but I never thought much of it. That night, Sophia greeted me with her usual warmth. She smelled like vanilla and something softer, something intimate that made my heart rate quicken. For a moment, I let myself sink into the illusion of normalcy, the belief that nothing could ever touch us. Dinner was quiet, too quiet. Vanessa made small talk, jokes that seemed harmless, but I noticed the glances, quick, fleeting, subtle, but unmistakable. Sophia laughed a little too loudly at things she wouldn't normally find funny. My instincts pricked at me, a low hum of tension I couldn't shake. I dismissed it, told myself I was imagining things. I had no reason to doubt Sophia, and yet the pit in my stomach told me something was off. The next few days I started noticing patterns. A lingering text on Sophia's phone that she tried too quickly to hide. A whisper of a laugh over the phone that stopped abruptly when I walked in. Vanessa was everywhere at the office social events, suddenly popping up at places I didn't expect. The city that had once felt like mine now started to feel smaller, more claustrophobic. Then came the night that changed everything. I was leaving the office later than usual, tired, drained, my mind cluttered with spreadsheets and client demands. I decided to call Sophia. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Odd, I thought. She always answered. And then Vanessa's voice on the line, laughing, "Oh, you're calling him now?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat, a cold warning running down my spine. Something was happening behind my back, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I brushed it off as paranoia. Maybe I was over... After all, I had no proof. Just a feeling. A whisper of something wrong in a life that had seemed so perfect. That weekend, I decided to throw myself into work, burying the unease under spreadsheets, contracts, and business calls. But late at night, in the silence of my apartment, I replayed every interaction, every glance, every subtle smile that didn't reach the eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted, small but persistent, growing quietly like a shadow at the edge of my vision. And then, just when I thought I could ignore it, the first real sign appeared, a text I wasn't supposed to see. From Vanessa, addressed to someone I didn't recognize at first. "He trusts us too much. Let's see how far we can go." I read it 3 times. My hands shook. The apartment felt colder, darker, the skyline outside mocking me with its glittering promises. Trust, I realized, was fragile. And betrayal. Betrayal could strike when you least expected it, hiding behind smiles, laughter, and the people you loved most. I didn't know it yet, but that text would change everything. My perfect life, my plans, my love, everything I thought I controlled was about to shatter. And when it did, I would have to decide, do I break too, or do I fight back? Little did Vanessa know, little did Sophia know. DJ was about to wake up. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same. The days after that text were a blur. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just coincidence. Paranoia creeping in after too many late nights and too much stress. But deep down, I knew. There was something wrong, something lurking behind Vanessa's smile and Sophia's sweet reassurances. I started paying attention to the small details. The way Sophia's laugh sometimes faltered when I walked in, the way Vanessa's eyes would flicker at certain moments, just long enough for me to notice. And then there were the late nights. Sophia suddenly had work to finish at odd hours, meetings she couldn't explain, calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Vanessa was constantly around, often helping, but I began to feel like I was being pushed out, like a guest in my own life. I remember one evening clearly. I had returned home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Sophia with dinner. I stepped into the apartment and froze, voices low, hushed, urgent coming from the living room. I wasn't supposed to hear them. I approached quietly, just enough to hear. Sophia's voice, softer than I had ever heard it, whispering something to Vanessa that made my blood run cold. "Are you sure about this? I don't want to hurt him too much." Vanessa laughed softly, a sound that should have been comforting but instead cut through me like ice. "Don't worry, he won't see it coming. Not a chance." I stepped back before they noticed me, my heart pounding. My perfect life was crumbling, piece by piece, and the walls I had built around my trust were starting to crack. I couldn't confront them, yet not without knowing everything. I needed to see the full picture, understand the depth of their betrayal. Over the next week, I began to observe them more closely. Every glance, every smile, every interaction became a puzzle I had to solve. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the patterns emerged. Little coincidences that weren't coincidences. Calls at odd hours. Texts disappearing from phones. Vanessa showing up by chance when she clearly wasn't supposed to be there. I confronted my mind constantly, asking myself if I was losing it. Was I imagining it all? But my instincts, honed over years of negotiating deals, spotting lies, reading people, told me this was real. And yet, I felt powerless. How do you act when betrayal is hiding in plain sight? When the people you love, the ones you trust most, are smiling at you while stabbing you in the back? Then came the moment that pushed me over the edgy late Friday evening at a corporate gala. I had insisted Sophia join me. She seemed hesitant, but agreed. Vanessa was there too, mingling effortlessly, as always. But something was different. Every interaction, every touch between Sophia and Vanessa had a hidden layer I couldn't ignore. The way they exchanged looks, the small, private jokes. The way Vanessa's hand brushed Sophia's just a little too intimately. I excused myself, pretending to take a call outside. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from an unknown number. "He's getting closer. Keep it perfect." My heart sank. There it was, the confirmation I had feared, the undeniable proof that my life, my love, my trust was being toyed with. I felt anger, shock, disbelief, all at once. And then came the resolve. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a challenge, a test. And I had never been the kind of man to fail at a challenge. I returned to the gala, pretending nothing was wrong. I smiled, nodded, laughed at their jokes. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was planning. Every move they made, every whisper, every hidden glance, I noted. And I realized something crucial. The higher they flew, the harder they would fall. By the end of that night, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice, about reclaiming the life that was being stolen from me. And I would not rest until Vanessa and Sophia realized that the person they underestimated the most was me. But first, I had to wait, to watch, to understand the full extent of their betrayal. Rushing in now would ruin everything. Patience, I reminded myself, is a weapon. And when the time was right, I would strike in a way they could never anticipate. For now, I had to endure the cracks, the whispers, the lies. The perfect life was gone, but from its ruins, something stronger would rise, something they would never see coming. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the city feels alive with energy, but I couldn't feel it. I was numb, moving through the motions of life, while my mind replayed every suspicious moment, every odd glance, every hidden message. The seed of doubt had grown into a raging storm. I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful. I returned home early, pretending it was just another long day at the office. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. My instincts screamed that something was happening, and this time, I wasn't going to miss it. I crept toward the living room, my heart hammering in my chest. That's when I saw them, Sophia and Vanessa, together on the couch, faces close, hands intertwined in a way that made my stomach drop. Time slowed. The world narrowed down to the two of them, laughing softly, sharing secrets I wasn't meant to hear. The betrayal wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was real, tangible, undeniable. The person I loved, the woman I trusted with my heart, my life, was smiling at my stepsister in a way I had never seen directed at me. I stumbled back, barely breathing. My hands shook. My mind raced with questions, accusations, disbelief. How could this happen? How could the people I loved most, my fiancé, my family, betray me so completely? And yet, the evidence was right in front of me. No excuses, no misinterpretations, no coincidences. Just betrayal, pure and raw. I didn't confront them immediately. That would have been a mistake. I had to see the full extent, understand how deep this went. For the next few days, I observed from the shadows, piecing together fragments of messages, secret meetings, and subtle hints. Every laugh, every hidden smile, every shared glance became a piece of a puzzle that painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Then came the confirmation, a photograph, sent anonymously to my private email. It showed Sophia and Vanessa at a secluded cafe, leaning close, hands touching, sharing a moment that was meant to be hidden. My heart shattered all over again. The woman I had trusted, the person I had imagined a lifetime with, had been hiding a secret, a life within my life. I remember collapsing onto my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling both anger and despair coursing through me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. My trust had been taken, my love toyed with, my life manipulated. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Pain alone wasn't enough. I couldn't just hurt, I had to act. The first step was clarity. I wrote down everything I knew. Messages, times, places, behaviors. I documented it all, not as a diary, but as a map of their deception. Each detail became a weapon, each moment of betrayal a tool for the plan I would build. Revenge wouldn't come from brute force, it would come from strategy, precision, and timing. That night, I stayed awake, staring out at the city skyline, feeling a strange sense of calm amid the chaos. The people who had deceived me were confident, careless, and unaware of the storm that was quietly gathering. I thought about the perfect life I had believed in, now shattered. And I smiled, just a little, knowing that the person they had underestimated the most was me. I wouldn't rush. I would wait. I would watch, and when the moment came, they would realize the full extent of their mistake. Sophia and Vanessa had betrayed me. Yes, but they had also awakened a part of me I hadn't known existed. A part that was calm, calculating, patient, deadly in its precision. The betrayal had been revealed. The heartbreak was real. And the war had begun. A war of violence, but of exposure, strategy, and ultimate justice. By the end of that week, I had made a decision. This would be a lesson they would never forget. Every move they made, every secret they kept, would be turned against them not in anger, but in a way that would leave them speechless, exposed, and powerless. And as I drifted to sleep that night, the city lights below twinkling like distant stars, I whispered to myself, they think they've won. They have no idea the game has just begun. The days after discovering the betrayal were the longest of my life. Waking up felt like stepping into a world that had shifted overnight. Every corner of my apartment, every object, every memory screamed their deceit. Sophia's laugh, Vanessa's smile, all the moments I had cherished were now poisoned. The perfect life I had built wasn't just broken, it had been taken from me by the very people I had trusted most. I tried to talk to myself, to reason, to find a way to make sense of it. But no logic could reconcile the reality. My fiancé, the person I had planned my future with, and my stepsister, family by blood, had been playing a secret game behind my back. Grief hit me in waves, betrayal, sadness, disbelief. But amidst the storm, one thought crystallized. I couldn't let this defeat me. I wouldn't just hurt, I would act. I spent the next days in quiet observation, hiding my turmoil behind calm expressions, casual smiles, and the illusion of normalcy. I needed time, patience, and clarity. Every interaction between Sophia and Vanessa, every hidden message, every subtle glance became data. I wrote it all down, times, places, phrases, behaviors until I could see the full pattern. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was deliberate, methodical, and calculated. I also reflected on myself. I asked the questions no one wants to ask. How did I let this happen? Was I blind because I wanted to believe in them? Could I have seen it sooner? And then I realized something important. Blame alone wouldn't help me. This wasn't about vengeance in the moment. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and making them understand the depth of their mistake without losing myself in the process. That night, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, laptop open, city lights blinking like distant fireflies. I began planning, not impulsively, not with rage, but strategically. I needed a plan that would expose their betrayal fully in a way that left no room for denial. A plan that would be precise, elegant, and irreversible. I started by mapping their routines. Vanessa's social appearances, Sophia's work commitments, the way they communicated with each other secretly. Every pattern was a thread I could pull. I noted potential allies, those unaware of the deception, but capable of helping the plan unfold. Friends, colleagues, anyone who could witness their actions without them realizing. Then came the subtle psychological edge. Betrayal is most painful when it's exposed quietly. When the betrayer feels the weight of every lie they told. I imagined the scenarios, the reactions, the perfect moments to let them realize they were no longer in control. It wasn't about cruelty, it was about justice and balance. But strategy wasn't enough. I also needed emotional readiness. I spent long nights training my mind to remain calm, patient, and composed. Anger, if uncontrolled, could ruin the plan. Grief, if unchecked, could cloud my judgment. I reminded myself this wasn't personal destruction, it was reclamation. I would rise above the chaos they had created, and in doing so, I would demonstrate the power of restraint, intelligence, and self-respect. I also had to consider Sophia. Despite everything, she was someone I had loved deeply. Part of me still hoped she could choose honesty over deceit, but another part knew hope alone wouldn't save me. I had to prepare for the moment when the truth would confront her directly. Would she regret it? Would she realize the depth of her betrayal? These questions fueled my resolve. By the end of the week, the plan began to take shape. It wasn't about confrontation with screams or public humiliation. It was about subtle exposure, letting the truth reveal itself through actions, coincidences, and carefully timed revelations. They would see that the person they underestimated, the one they thought powerless, was quietly orchestrating every step. And so, I waited. I watched. Every small action, every interaction, every secret message became part of the puzzle. Vanessa and Sophia had set the stage for their own downfall. They just didn't know it yet. I looked at my reflection in the window that night. The city stretched endlessly behind me, glowing with lights and possibilities. And in that reflection, I saw not a broken man, but one who was ready. Ready to rise, ready to reclaim what was mine, and ready to make them understand in the most unforgettable way. That betrayal carries consequences they had never imagined. The storm inside me had settled into a quiet, focused intensity. The heartbreak had not disappeared, but it had been transformed into power, patience, and clarity. And as I turned away from the window, I whispered to myself, "This is just the beginning. Wait and watch. Justice will come not from anger, but from truth." I'd rehearsed the plan in my head so many times it felt like a script I could recite with my eyes closed. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was a chess game, slow and deliberate. Each piece I moved had a purpose. If I wanted them to fall, it would be because they fell into traps I'd built with their own secrets, their own arrogance, and their desperate need to keep control. The first move was to make the invisible visible. Vanessa and Sophia had perfected secrecy. I would force those whispers into the light without looking like the man who'd been betrayed. So I started small, where mistakes are easiest to hide in the small slips people make when they feel invincible. I created a fake persona online, a casual stranger who asked casual questions in the right places. I didn't need to be clever. People like Vanessa adored attention and made careless comments when they felt admired. Within a week, I had her saying things she shouldn't in places she thought were private. I kept screenshots, timestamps, tiny threads of proof that would later stitch together a narrative no one could deny. Next, I turned to their world, the life that had always made them feel untouchable. Social circles, work, the curated image of perfection. Vanessa loved the charity events, the photo ops, the way cameras softened her edges. I started feeding subtle rumors at the edges of those events, anonymous questions that seeded doubt, not lies, questions. Isn't it odd how Vanessa's been spending so much time with Sophia lately? Did anyone see them leave together after the last event? People are drawn to gossip like moths to flame. It spread quietly, like a smoke that would later reveal the fire. Sophia was more complicated. She was careful, practiced. She hid behind plausible reasons, work stress, emotional confusion, the tired line of a woman balancing too much. I needed something concrete, something she couldn't spin into innocence. So I dug into patterns. Late-night meetings that didn't make sense, expenses that didn't add up, a plane ticket hidden in a shared account. I pulled in documents, receipts, and times. The financial trail was cold and objective. It doesn't lie. And I needed witnesses. Not the screaming kind, but the people who could corroborate without drama. A bartender who remembered seeing Vanessa and Sophia at a cafe in the afternoon when they claimed otherwise. A driver who noted times. A colleague who'd accidentally forwarded a message. I didn't coerce. I collected. I was careful to keep distance, to let the evidence appear organic. When the time came, those witnesses would be the quiet chorus that confirmed what the photos and messages screamed. There was a dangerous element to all this, the part where I had to look calm in public, while setting the world on fire under the surface. I showed up at dinners, smiles fixed, jokes ready, laughter practiced. People told me I seemed different, quieter, more reflective. They assumed it was the breakup. Little did they know, I was constructing a mirror that would reflect their own lies back at them. One night, I planted the most delicate of traps. A fake, anonymous email sent to a mutual circle with a subject line simple enough to be overlooked, for eyes that care. Inside, a link hid a folder that, when clicked, showed a string of photos, screenshots, and receipts, proof compiled from weeks of patient work. I didn't send it far. I let it reach exactly 3 people, 2 close friends of Sophia, who were still honest, and a private investigator. I'd hired under the guise of someone checking background work for a corporate matter. I needed credibility, and verified channels gave it. Their reactions were immediate, but not the dramatic collapse I'd expected. That was good. I wanted subtle collapse, the kind that erodes others' confidence in them. The friends messaged me in confidence the following morning. "We're so sorry." That message was a seed that would later sprout into public questioning. The psychological part was the most satisfying. People who cheat, who hide, live in constant, small lies. When you nudge one thread, the entire fabric starts to pucker. I began to orchestrate coincidences that would make their cover feel thin. I showed up accidentally where they were meeting. I let a small, innocuous question be overheard in a cafe. I left a voicemail on a roommate's phone that hinted at knowledge I didn't actually have. All of it was staged to create unease within their circle, to make them second-guess messages, to make Vanessa's confident smiles tremble. But there was one risk I hadn't fully anticipated. My own heart. Revenge is a strange mirror. As I watched their world wobble, flashes of old memories, Sophia's hands on my cheek, Vanessa's mischievous grin as a child would intrude. At night, I'd wake and feel guilt, like a phantom limb. I would remind myself why I was doing this, not to destroy them cruelly, but to reclaim honesty and protect my dignity. That kept me steady. Then came the day I knew the public push had to begin. I arranged for the evidence to reach a journalist, not an aggressive tabloid, but a reputable writer who covered corporate scandals and social betrayals with the kind of restraint that brings credibility. Reputation is fragile. The right author could turn private gossip into an immovable record. I emailed him a short factual note, possible story, discrete sources, verified documents attached. I included only what I could prove beyond reasonable doubt. He wrote back asking to meet. The rendezvous was deliberately banal, a coffee shop, midday, to people in neutral coats. I handed over a folder, watched as the journalist flipped through the pages. Timestamps, screenshots, receipts, corroborating witness notes. He looked up and asked one question, more a confirmation than curiosity. "Are you sure you want this public?" I told him the truth. "I want the truth to be known." He nodded. "Then I'll do the rest." As the journalist worked his side quietly, I focused on another front, the corporate world Vanessa loved, She'd been using her influence to broker deals, to charm sponsors. I started reaching out to partners she'd been counting on, not with accusations, but with questions that invited scrutiny. "We've noticed discrepancies on the last sponsorship report," I'd say. "Could you double-check the timeline?" Small audits, polite inquiries, quiet pressure. When a sponsor looked twice at Vanessa's numbers and saw irregularities, they pulled back. Business is unforgiving to doubt. 2 weeks into execution, and I could feel them fraying. Vanessa's social calendar thinned. The cameras that once followed her missed her face. Sophia's job performance dipped. Nervousness is visible, even in the most careful of professionals. Their whispers grew sharper, their meetings shorter. They were exhausted from lying. It was textbook and cruelly beautiful to watch. But the final act had to be public and precise. Not a screaming scene, but a reveal they couldn't spin. I scheduled it for the charity gala Vanessa adored, the place where her image was most precious. I arranged for the journalist to attend and for key witnesses to be present: the bartender, the driver, the friend who received the anonymous email. I did it all under the guise of a business call, so no one could link me to the evening. The night of the gala, I stood against a wall, tux fitting perfectly, smile clipped like a well-edited script. Vanessa floated through the room, luminous and unaware. Sophia stood beside her, rehearsed smiles, hiding exhaustion. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, applause rose like sea foam. And somewhere in the crowd, a phone buzzed. A message sent to friends with a link, the same folder I'd given the journalist. It started slowly. A whisper at a table, a phone screen being glanced at. The journalist, impeccable in timing, rose to speak about transparency in charity work, a neutral topic. Then he pivoted, naturally, to anomalies in charitable reporting, to integrity, and then, with a professional calm that made it hurt worse, he said, "We have documents and witnesses confirming irregularities linked to a member of this community." Heads turned, a friend's mouth opened. Vanessa leaned forward, curiosity written in the curve of her jaw. The air recalibrated. That's when the first messages started pouring in, screenshots, timestamps, and I watched the room shrink around them. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They looked at each other, and in that look was the comprehension of what I had known for months. Exposure. I felt nothing like triumph. I felt something more like the hollow after a long storm. They would have their moment of collapse soon enough. And as the journalist's voice trailed off and the crowd began to murmur, I felt my own pulse steady. The plan had unfolded exactly the way I'd imagined. Patient, surgical, inevitable. But there was one final move I still hadn't made. One confrontation that would make the exposure personal, unforgettable. I kept that card to myself, close to the chest, waiting for the moment when their world had cracked enough that the last piece would finish it. The room blurred for a second, and I realized I was smiling, not in victory, but because the game was almost over. They were about to learn what happens when someone you underestimate finds the courage to turn silence into truth. Outside the gala, a message lit my phone. "We're starting to look into the accounts. This will get messy." Messy was an understatement. It was exactly what it needed to be. The gala had started as a glittering display of perfection. With Vanessa and Sophia at the center, radiant and untouchable or so they thought, but beneath the shimmer, the web I had spun was tightening, invisible yet unyielding. By the time I arrived, carefully blending into the crowd, the first ripples had begun. Phones buzzed. Conversations paused. Eyes darted. Whispers of doubt had spread faster than any of them anticipated. I watched Vanessa first. She noticed subtle changes, almost immediately a friend, glancing at a screen. A raised eyebrow from someone she trusted, the tiniest hesitation in a familiar face. Panic doesn't announce itself loudly. It starts as a tremor, and she felt it ripple through her world. Her smile faltered, just slightly. The perfection she depended on began to crumble in real time. Sophia was worse. I could see it in her hands, in the way she held her drink, like it might shatter. Every carefully rehearsed expression betrayed tension. Every laugh she forced felt hollow. They had both lived in a cocoon of secrecy for months, and now the threads were unraveling around them. The journalist I had arranged for stood calm and poised and began speaking about integrity, accountability, and transparency in public and charitable life. The transition was seamless. Then, with professional composure, He presented a neutral overview before revealing evidence carefully curated, undeniable, and factual. Screenshots of messages, emails, receipts, witness confirmations. Each item carried weight, a bullet of truth that struck harder than any accusation could. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes searched the room for allies, but there were none who could credibly defend her. Sophia's gaze dropped to the floor, shame and disbelief etched into every line of her face. They had always assumed that secrecy protected them. They had assumed that charm and reputation could shield them. They were wrong. I stepped forward, casually, letting my presence be noticed without drawing attention to myself.